On April 28, 2024, the pastor of Solid Rock Church delivered his usual sermon. The atmosphere was lighthearted, with laughter filling the room as Pastor John Paul J.P. Miller spoke of himself as a charming, attractive, and humble man, a guide to finding God. His words resonated with the congregation, and the mood remained joyful. After concluding his sermon, John Paul made a series of unusual requests. First, he asked everyone to stand. Next, he insisted that no one ask any questions after he made an important announcement. Then he requested that everyone leave the church in complete silence without making any comments. Lastly, he urged the congregation to continue attending services regularly, mainly to keep up with their donations. A heavy silence fell over the church, and John Paul's words not only deeply affected those present, but would be remembered for years to come. He made a shocking announcement. His wife, Mica Miller, just 30 years old, had taken her own life the previous day. John Paul J.P. Miller married Allison Miller on February 26, 2000, and they had 5 children together. J.P. had a deep love for Jesus, which led him to start working as a pastor when he was around 20 years old. In 2006, he began holding church services in a library, attended only by his family and a few close friends. After some time, J.P. constructed his own church. When J.P. was 28, he met Mica, who was just 14 years old at the time. Mica and her family moved to Myrtle Beach in 2008, and that's where Mica and J.P. met at his church. Mica even worked as a babysitter for J.P. and Allison. J.P. and Allison's marriage started having serious problems when Allison accused him of having relationships with minors and being addicted to prostitution. The church urged J.P. to get therapy, but he refused. Despite these serious accusations, he kept preaching as if nothing was wrong. This caused some members of the congregation to leave because they couldn't reconcile his actions with their Christian beliefs. In 2015, J.P. and Mica began a secret relationship, although it wasn't really a secret because Allison eventually caught them in the act. J.P. and Allison's marriage ended in divorce in 2016. The following year, J.P. proposed to Mica, and they got married in his church, with J.P. officiating the ceremony himself. After they got married, things started to get worse. Mica revealed that J.P. began abusing her in every possible way, sexually, financially, and emotionally. Despite this, they stayed together and even went on mission trips to countries like Ethiopia and Mexico. Their religious beliefs didn't allow for divorce, and it seemed like Mica was determined to make the marriage work until she just couldn't anymore. By November 2022, things had become unbearable. Mica left to stay with her family because she couldn't take it anymore. J.P. sent her an email saying that when someone hurts him, he retaliates instead of forgiving. When Mica decided to move in with her sister, J.P. threatened both her and her sister. In February 2023, despite all their issues, J.P. and Mica signed a prenuptial agreement 6 years after getting married. At that time, they were living in the church, which was excluded as a marital asset if they got divorced. Basically, if they divorced, Mica would get nothing. The agreement also stated that neither of them would talk about the church's internal matters or publicly discuss their problems. On October 8th of the same year, Mica filed for divorce, but the case was dismissed because they said they wanted to give their marriage another try. However, just 10 days later, JP filed for divorce since they were no longer living together and wanted to end the relationship. This case was also eventually withdrawn. JP didn't stick to the terms of the prenuptial agreement. During his sermons, he often talked about the problems he was having with Mica, telling the congregation that she had mental health issues. Many church members, seeing how JP was talking about his wife, felt sorry for Mica and offered her their support. By this time, JP had already set his sights on another woman. He openly said that his plan was to pray, get rich, and find himself a hot woman. JP also claimed that his enemies had tried to harm him, referring to Mica during their heated arguments, but he said it didn't bother him at all. He claimed to pray for them, hoping they would find repentance, but insisted that their actions were not against him, but against the kingdom of God. In February 2024, Mica was admitted to a mental institution. On the day she was set to be discharged, the doctors and nurses informed her that her husband had taken her wallet and car keys. When Mica was finally released, JP was nowhere to be found, and her car wasn't where it had been parked. She called the police to report that her husband had stolen her belongings and had been manipulating her since they met, making her appear insane. The police contacted the pastor to get his side of the story, but he simply told them that his wife was mentally unstable, that she had an episode like this every year lasting about a month, and that he wouldn't return the car until this phase passed because the vehicle was marital property, not solely hers. There wasn't much the police could do, as no crime had technically been committed and they weren't divorced. Throughout the story, it becomes clear that the relationship between the two was severely strained, with JP constantly slandering his wife and portraying her as mentally ill, something that must have been infuriating for her. If things were bad before, they were about to get much worse. Then another episode happened and Mica had to call the police again. Someone had slashed her tires. When she took the car to the shop, they discovered a system installed that slowly deflated the tires, something that could have caused a serious accident if she hadn't noticed it in time. But that wasn't all. A GPS tracker had also been installed, allowing someone to monitor her every move. She told the police who she suspected was responsible, but without evidence, it was just an accusation. Later that day, while she was at a gas station, her husband showed up. She told him she didn't want to talk and asked him to leave her alone. He reacted violently, threatening to post a topless photo of her on Facebook, to which she replied that she would press charges if he did. Mica recorded the entire interaction. The pastor left, but he continued to follow her. Mica called the police again, and an officer met her at her location. While she was explaining everything that had been happening, she received a call from an anonymous number. The officer told him to leave her alone, to stop contacting her, and warned that if he didn't, a restraining order would be issued. Mica told the officer she feared for her life, explaining that since she was 14 years old when they first met, he had been trying to control everything she did, including whom she spoke with, to mold her into his way of thinking. Later that same day, Mica contacted the police again, this time requesting a restraining order. The officer met with her again and confirmed that a GPS tracker had indeed been installed to monitor her movements. And as they were talking, JP appeared. By this point, things were seriously deteriorating. Mica called the police multiple times, yet nothing was done, and JP continued to do as he pleased, stalking her, installing a GPS, deflating her tires, and behaving as though he had absolute control over her. Some days later, Mica posted a video on her Facebook account. In the video, she urges people in abusive situations to share it, hoping it might help someone. With a heavy heart, she says, "There are many women who have reached out to me because they are in abusive situations. I just want to say what so many people have been telling me lately. I knew it, but I had pushed it to the back of my mind because of my situation. You are the bride of Christ first before anyone else, regardless of your gender. Abuse is abuse, and you are Christ's bride. My Bible says that He Himself endured all the suffering you can imagine for you, so you wouldn't have to live a life of slavery and pain. Abuse, whether it's sexual, physical, emotional, or mental, is never your fault. God hates divorce, but what He hates even more is abuse." Then, Mica filed for divorce, and 2 days later, she made her last post, which featured an image that read, "Success is not always what you see." On the 27th of April, Mica was captured on her home security camera leaving her house. Other cameras caught her buying a handgun and ammunition. She bought a sandwich and headed to a state park in Northern Carolina. Soon after, 911 received a call.
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
You don't know where you're at?
A national park
Where's the park located at?
in Fair Bluff. I have my location on, I think, on my phone. Find My Phone is on. I just did my my location.
Are you at the Lumber River State Park?
Yeah, that's where I am. I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
Okay, ma'am. Just listen to what I'm saying, okay? Let me make sure I got the exact location where you're at, okay? Just 1 minute.
Authorities were notified, and a drone was dispatched to survey the park to determine if this was a genuine emergency. The drone located her car, which was parked, and a fisherman later reported finding a wallet with the ID of Mica Miller after hearing a woman crying. He found it in the water, where they also discovered Mica's lifeless body. After confirming that just 2 days earlier, a divorce filing had been made and a restraining order was issued, the North Carolina police investigated John Paul's whereabouts at the time of the incident. Neither he nor his lover were in the city. There are camera recordings of his car driving on a state highway, but there's no way to confirm if he was actually driving. Only a blood alcohol test was performed on Mica's body, but no autopsy was conducted, which should have included a toxicology report and an examination of the trajectory and cause of the gunshot. This would have ensured that it was self-inflicted and not caused by someone else. It appears that the shot was to the head with no exit wound, and her death was ruled a suicide. John Paul was given control over Mica's body, and he decided to have her cremated. But before doing so, just 1 day after Mica's body was found, on the 28th, JP gave a sermon at his church.
We're not going to do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up, and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can. So y'all can stand to your feet. Before I make the announcement, I also want to say that my request to you is that you will continue to come to church and serve and give for the next little bit. 'Cause I don't want to have. I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks. I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. And we're gonna have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can. I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And she wasn't. Y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her.
3 days after her death, JP officiated a funeral for his wife, while her family held a separate one. Shortly after Mica's death, John Paul sent a message to a group chat with her family. This is what happens when you encourage someone to divorce the person they love and tell them they don't need medication and aren't sick when they really are. Great job. Mica's sister responded, "It's easy to blame others when that's all you know how to do. No one told her to stop her medication. Get that into your head. You drove her insane, plain and simple, and the surgery you forced her to get pushed her over the edge. How dare you even contact us and speak like this?" The surgery her sister referred to was a breast augmentation that the pastor had pressured his wife into getting. Mica's family started expressing numerous doubts about the circumstances of her death. To begin with, they noticed bruises on her back and scratches on her hand. The office that examined her body claimed that these might have been from when she was pulled out of the water. And since no autopsy was conducted and her body had been cremated, these doubts could not be investigated. Mica's father stated that a bullet was found lodged in a tree near where her body was discovered, one of the same bullets Mica had bought before heading to the park. It's strange that someone intending to take their own life would miss on the first attempt. He also mentioned that his daughter had never been to that location before and that the last time he spoke to her, she didn't seem like herself. She had told him she was buying a gun for protection because she feared for her life, and she knew how to use it since she had taken shooting classes. The police didn't check her car for a GPS device, despite Mica's earlier claims, nor did they confirm whether JP was actually driving the car caught on camera, supposedly with his lover. Incidentally, this is the same lover JP tried to cheat on with a waitress, to whom he left a $20 tip along with his phone number. Mica's family claims that the voice in the 911 call didn't sound like her. She spoke slowly in the recording, but normally she was much more lively, speaking quickly. Now, there's speculation that Mica wasn't alone that day and that someone forced her to make the call. If Mica was truly concerned about her family finding her body, wouldn't she have left a note or sent her location to a family member? Some people are even suggesting that her voice in the 911 call could have been generated by artificial intelligence. Where did the bruises and scratches come from? Was she alive when her body was placed in the water? Why was there dirt on her hands? And why did she buy food if she was planning to end her life? Why did she have a hair appointment that week and plans to go on a mission trip? Mica was, by all accounts, happier than she had been in a long time, finally thinking about living her life on her own, away from this man. So, why wasn't an autopsy performed? There are so many unanswered questions. This case has become a major topic in the U.S., prompting the FBI to launch its own investigation. JP's lover spoke out, referring to Mica as mentally ill and claiming she wasn't taking her medication. This woman didn't even know Mica, only what JP told her, and he was unfaithful to her, or at least tried to be. Second, the waitress JP was flirting with, to whom he sent bikini photo requests, has also come forward, sharing the messages he sent her. Just days after Mica's death, this man reached out to her again, asking how she was doing. She responded that she was fine and asked how he was, to which he replied, "Just dealing with a lot of stuff these days." The husband of JP's lover had a tragic accident that left him paralyzed. One night, while in his wheelchair near a pool, he fell in and drowned. John Paul officiated his funeral and then got involved with his widow. The Solid Rock Church website is currently offline. There were rumors that JP had been expelled from the church. There are times in life when many, if not all, of us go through low points, anxiety, and fear. Having someone beside you who is trying to make you feel like you're losing your mind only exacerbates these feelings, making you seem truly insane. And there are more people like that out there than we think. Mica knew JP was one of them, and she made sure to record many of their arguments. She even told her sister, "If I ever disappear, I didn't do it. It was John Paul." Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. The afternoon of January 15th, 2016, began like any other day. Maria de Jesus Zamudio called her mother, Yesenia Zamudio, to share her plans for the evening. She sounded very excited. She was going to a scenic restaurant followed by karaoke with some friends. Her mother wasn't worried. Her daughter was always very cautious. At 4 in the morning, Yesenia was sleeping peacefully until her phone began to ring. When she answered, she couldn't recognize the caller's voice. The only thing she understood was that Marishui, as she affectionately called her daughter, had suffered a fall and was admitted to the hospital. Confused, Yesenia contacted her ex-husband, and they both rushed to the indicated clinic, but they couldn't find their daughter there. They searched everywhere until they finally found her at another hospital. The situation was worse than it seemed. Her daughter had a traumatic brain injury and fractures in her femur and legs. But that wasn't the most terrible part. Marishui was in a coma. According to the doctors, the young woman had tried to take her own life by jumping from the 5th floor of an apartment. Neither Yesenia nor her ex-husband believed this. They knew there was something much more sinister behind that story, and they wouldn't rest until they found out the truth. Maria de Jesus Zamudio was born on April 5, 1996, in Mexico City. As the third among 4 sisters, she quickly won over the hearts of all who knew her, affectionately earning the nickname Marishui. Throughout her elementary education, she attended a Catholic school. Her dream was to become a nun to help as many people as possible, aiming above all to distinguish herself from selfish individuals. To achieve her goals, she spent every afternoon with her best friend, organizing plays, dances, and talks for younger children to draw them closer to religion. Her interest didn't stop there. She was an extremely active girl, keen on sports, practicing karate and swimming. However, over time, she discovered her true passion was basketball. As a teenager, Marishui moved away from religion, but not from her studies. She became a very cultured and diligent young woman, spending her time reading and visiting museums every Sunday. She also had a passion for taking photographs of her cat. Although she enjoyed going out like any other teenager, she did not do it often, preferring to spend time with her family. Her passion for study paid off, and she was admitted to the Petroleum Engineering program at the National Polytechnic Institute. Out of 822 applicants, she was one of the 176 women who got in. Initially, Marishui thought she couldn't attend because it was a costly institution, but her record of excellent grades earned her a full scholarship. Despite having her studies secured, the young woman wanted to be economically independent and got a formal job at a cinema chain in Mexico City. There, she won the affection of both her colleagues and customers. Even on promotion days, when the cinema was packed, she managed to make those who approached the purchase window smile. Her goal was to save enough money to take her nephews to Disneyland. Meanwhile, she enjoyed celebrating the Day of the Dead with them, her favorite holiday. Every November, she made bags of sweets and went out to distribute them with the little ones. Marishui's kindness was not only reflected in her relationship with her nephews. She remembered all her close ones' birthdays, visited them whenever they were sad, and helped them with any inconvenience. She was surrounded by people who loved her. She had the best possible relationship with her mother. They texted each other every morning and dreamed of moving together to a house in Playa del Carmen. Marishui had her whole life planned out. After finishing her degree, she would pursue a master's, then work as an engineer, and later form a family as united as her own. In 2016, she achieved one of her goals. She moved into an apartment with another girl from the university. She had adjusted well to student life, joined the basketball team, and made many friends, but things were not as good as they seemed. Marishui began to suffer harassment from a faculty member named Julio Ivan Ruiz, who was in charge of the Introduction to Petroleum Drilling course. He went as far as suggesting through Facebook Messenger that she could pass the course in exchange for sexual favors. The young woman did not accept this. She spent the entire Christmas vacation studying and took the extraordinary period exam. Julio just gave her a hostile look and failed her. The torment didn't end there. She was also harassed by a student named Mario, who sent her messages every day, claiming he was in love with her. Despite Marishui's lack of response, he continued writing, and the messages became increasingly aggressive. Uncomfortable with both situations, Marishui formally requested a change of major, but she never went through with it. On the afternoon of January 15, 2016, Marishui spoke with her mother on the phone, as she did every day, telling her that she would go to a scenic restaurant with some friends, then they would visit a karaoke bar, and she would return home to sleep. At 4 in the morning, Yesenia's phone began to ring. When she answered, she heard an unknown voice, informing her that Marishui had fallen and was admitted to a hospital. Yesenia immediately hung up the phone without asking for explanations. The most important thing at that moment was to see her daughter. She went to the clinic with her ex-husband. Upon arrival, the receptionist informed her that her daughter was not there. They searched every hospital in the region until they finally arrived at the Valbuena Hospital. Her name was on the list of the last admitted, but with several spelling mistakes. However, that was not the worst part. What truly shocked Yesenia and her ex-husband was finding out that Marishui had not suffered a simple fall. The doctors told them she had fallen from the window of an apartment, which was on the 5th floor, sustaining a traumatic brain injury, and was in a coma. The situation was strange, but Yesenia preferred to focus first on her daughter's health. Although the young woman had a chance to survive, she needed to undergo several surgeries for the fractures in her femur, legs, and skull, which were extremely costly. Through social media, Yesenia asked all of Marishui's friends to pray for her and organized a fundraiser to cover the high medical expenses. Thanks to Marishui always helping her acquaintances, they did the same for her, allowing her to be transferred to a specialized hospital where she underwent multiple surgeries. But what happened that night? On January 15, 2016, Marishui attended a dinner at a restaurant at 8 in the evening, planning to eat with 3 friends, one of them named Gabriel. However, Gabriel unexpectedly invited the teacher, Julio Ivan, which made the young woman uncomfortable since he was the professor who had harassed her previously. Marishui tried to stay calm, and after dinner, they went to karaoke. When they left, she tried to take a taxi to return to her apartment, but the teacher insisted on driving her in his truck, which Gabriel was driving. Marishui, somewhat frightened, accepted and sat in the back with the 2 men. During the ride, Julio and Gabriel began to touch Marishui, and when she tried to escape by getting out of the truck, they knocked her down and forcefully put her back in. Upon arriving at her apartment, some neighbors saw Gabriel and Julio carrying Marishui up the stairs while she hit and struggled to escape from them. She even knocked on some apartment doors asking for help, but no one helped her, not even her friends with whom she shared the rent, thinking it might be a robbery. Minutes later, they opened the apartment, and once inside, Gabriel and Julio tried to undress her to abuse her, managing to tear her clothes and break the buttons. The other two roommates just watched from afar and decided not to intervene. Marichuy continued screaming and asking for help. Seeing that the situation was going nowhere, Julio and Gabriel proceeded to throw her out of the window. A neighbor named Rosa saw Marichuy's body fall more than 12 meters, while her attackers fled the scene, at which point she called the police. Marichuy fought for her life in the hospital for several days, but ultimately, she died. This version was confirmed after a forensic doctor mentioned that the injury mechanics provided key elements, indicating that the young woman did not jump headfirst into the void but fell feet first because she tried to grab her attackers until the last moment. This was also proven by finding Julio and Gabriel's DNA under Marichuy's nails, leading to a 180-degree turn in the case. In 2018, authorities discarded the accident hypothesis and the idea that she took her own life, classifying the incident as manslaughter, with Gabriel and Julio as the main suspects. However, the latter continued teaching at the university as if nothing had happened. Yesenia was dissatisfied, stating that the case should be classified as femicide, and that by not doing so, they were diminishing the importance of the abuse her daughter had suffered before dying. She filed a complaint with the Mexico City Human Rights Commission. Due to the investigation file being poorly compiled, Yesenia also filed numerous complaints with the Mexico City Secretary of Public Security, the Superior Court of Justice of the capital, and the then city prosecutor's office. The Mexico City Human Rights Commission initiated an investigation and determined that evidence had been omitted during the case. There was evidence of police incompetence and a clear lack of interest on the part of the state. In a report, it was established that in the early hours of January 16th, a police officer arrived at the scene and entered the apartment to see where the victim had jumped from, but only glanced around. After the ambulance left, the officer departed without securing the apartment or the area where the victim fell, and without notifying the judicial authority, which could have led to the manipulation of evidence afterward. Additionally, the autopsy performed on Marichuy lacked basic requirements, such as listing all the individuals who had contact with the body and examining the intimate area to determine if she had suffered abuse before her death. Yesenia requested a public act in which the government would acknowledge their responsibility for these omissions and announce measures established to prevent their recurrence. This request was completely ignored, and the case was shelved again. Both Julio and Gabriel fled, and justice seemed far off. Tired of waiting for answers from the government, Yesenia joined the movement called Ni Una Menos and organized dozens of demonstrations, not only for her daughter, but also for all women who had been murdered because of their gender. In February 2020, Yesenia attended an event to demand justice for the femicide of a young woman who was killed by her partner after an argument. The demonstration took place outside the building where the crime occurred, where Yesenia gave a speech accusing the Mexican government of not having personnel trained in gender violence. Yesenia's speech went viral, and Marichuy's case was finally brought back into focus. On September 7, 2020, it was finally classified as femicide, and Mexico City authorities made a public apology to Yesenia and the victim's relatives. On January 25, 2022, a new event for Marichuy's case took place at the National Polytechnic Institute, where the university joined the apology previously made by the authorities. Although the general director was present, it was the institution's lawyer who extended the apology. Yesenia accepted the apologies but mentioned that more work was needed to find the murderers, who were still at large. She also remembered how Marishui's dreams were taken away 5 years ago, saying that if her daughter were alive, she would surely be in love, working, and very happy, as she had been throughout her short life. Months later, the National Polytechnic Institute, where Marishui studied, posthumously awarded the petroleum engineering degree to Yesenia. In February 2022, the police confirmed that, following intelligence operations, agents located and apprehended Gabriel, the probable perpetrator of Marishui's femicide. Thank you, dear audience, for tuning into Unreal True Crime. If our stories capture your interest, don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Your support fuels our passion for uncovering the truth. Join us next time for more deep dives into the intriguing world of true crime. Dear audience, we've taken your feedback to heart, and I'm here because of it. My name is Michael, and I'm your new storyteller. I'm eager to bring you compelling narratives that I hope you'll find as intriguing as I do. Please share your thoughts and comments with us. We're committed to becoming the go-to channel for crime stories. Now let's get started with our next episode. It was 7:53 a.m. on April 22, 2016, when the Pike County Police in southern Ohio, United States, received a shocking call. On the other side of the line, the voice of a woman broken by emotion said there was blood everywhere. She was breathing heavily and couldn't provide more information. Eventually, she managed to explain what had happened, saying she had found her brother-in-law and one of his cousins, both seriously injured. The officers headed there. As they were en route to the residence, a neighbor asked them to stop. He wanted to give them 2 more addresses, those of relatives of the victims, feeling in his heart that they too had been attacked. Meanwhile, the woman found 2 more family members in another house, and the bodies began to pile up. By the time they visited the 3 trailer homes, the death toll was 7, all having been shot in the head while sleeping. As if that wasn't enough, by midday, they received news that another family member had been found dead. The only survivors were a 3-year-old boy, a 6-month-old baby, and another just 4 days old. Little Sophie was also alive, who, by chance, was with her father that night, as if she had known she needed to be protected. The Rodens were a large family from Ohio, United States. The patriarch, Christopher Roden, had been married to Dana Roden, with whom he had 3 children, Frankie, Hannah Mae, and Christopher Jr. By 2016, Christopher and Dana had separated but lived on the same property located on Union Hill Road in the rural area of Pike in Ohio, which they owned. Christopher, a 40-year-old laborer, worked at the family's Big Bear Lake complex and lived in a trailer with his 38-year-old cousin, Gary. Dana, then 37, worked as a nursing assistant at a rehabilitation center and resided in a trailer 2 kilometers from her ex-husband with their younger children, who were then 19 and 16 years old. Hannah's 2-year-old daughter, Sophie, also spent most of her time with them. Later, Frankie, who was 20, moved with his fiancée to another nearby trailer. He had a 3-year-old son named Bentley from a previous relationship and a 6-month-old baby with his new partner, spending most of his time helping his father at the complex. The family was rounded out by Kenneth, Christopher's brother. Like the rest of his relatives, he was known for being hard-working, commuting daily to Columbus for work, and living only 15 minutes away from the rest of his family. On April 18, 2016, the Roden family expanded with the arrival of Hannah's new daughter, whose father was unknown. Although it was speculated that the father could be Charlie, the brother of her sister-in-law, there was no certainty. Hannah had no interest in finding out, as she did not have a good relationship with Jake Wagner, Sophie's father. She preferred that the care of the new baby remained within the family, as she worked as a nursing assistant and finished high school. The relationship within the Roden family was such that they even included Bobby Jo Manley, Dana's sister, in their lives. As she was unemployed, Christopher offered her work taking care of his animals, given the large size of his property. Bobby accepted, unaware that during one of those visits she would encounter the most unimaginable scene possible. It was 7:53 a.m. on April 22, 2016, when Bobby entered the trailer, as she did every day, quickly realizing the house was not empty. Inside, she found Christopher and Gary amidst a massive pool of blood. She immediately took out her cell phone and dialed emergency services, her voice breaking as she requested they come to 477 Union Hill Road. Then, as if on reflex, Bobby went to the homes of her other relatives, knocked on the door, but no one answered. Seconds later, little Bentley came out. Upon entering, Bobby was breathless at the sight. On the bed lay the lifeless bodies of Frank and his wife, assaulted. Alive but splattered with blood was the 6-month-old baby. As the police were en route to the scene, another neighbor intercepted them, urging them to visit 2 other nearby locations, suspecting there would be more casualties. They were right. In the 3rd house, they found the bodies of Dana, Christopher Jr., and Hannah, also covered in blood. The only survivor from that home was the infant, just a few days old. By then, the news had spread like wildfire in the media. A cousin of the Rodens went to ensure Kenneth was safe. Sadly, he too had been shot. He called the police to report he had found the last body. By 1:26 p.m., all the victims had been accounted for: Christopher, Dana, Frankie, Hannah Roden, Christopher Jr., Hannah Hazel, the fiancé of Frankie, Kenneth, and Gary. The only survivors were the young children whom the murderers had spared, and little Sophie, who, by chance, was at her father Jake's house. Examining the bodies, investigators were able to reconstruct the crime. Christopher had a defensive wound on his right arm, leading to the conclusion that he was awake when the assailants entered his home. He confronted the attackers but was overwhelmed by 9 gunshots. Gary was hit by 5 shots. Dana received the same number in her head and neck, some executed even after she had perished, indicating the attackers had been particularly brutal with her. Christopher Jr. was shot 4 times in the head while sleeping, as was Frankie. Hannah Hazel was also murdered with 2 shots to the skull. Kenneth was the only one with a single shot. All the victims had died from multiple gunshots fired from close range, precisely in the same body part. Detectives estimated the assailants fired a total of 32 times, clearly using a silencer, as no one in the area heard the noises. Moreover, all had their hands covered with plastic bags, and autopsy reports showed at least one of the victims had 9 significant wounds. It was clear this was a premeditated crime aimed at eradicating the entire clan, leaving unanswered who could have committed such a heinous act. Upon inspecting the scene, agents found 5 different types of bullet casings from Remington. However, they also found another unused bullet from a different model, confirming their suspicion that more than one attacker was involved in the crime. While the victim's blood was present in all the trailers, none of it matched the DNA of the perpetrators. Detectives attempted to review security camera footage from the homes, but the cameras had been disconnected. These devices also lacked DNA, clearly indicating that the planners of the crime had meticulously covered their tracks. Just as they were running out of hope, the officers found something. In 3 of the 4 homes, there were marijuana grow operations, and one of them contained more than 200 plants. They quickly theorized that the rodents were involved in drug trafficking, a common occurrence in Ohio, and speculated that the motive for the crime might have been a drug-related dispute. They investigated whether the family had connections to cartels or drug traffickers but found nothing. The possibility of a family dispute over drug money was also considered but led nowhere. Additionally, they found cockfighting rings in one of the trailers. However, illegal cockfighting did not seem to be the motive behind the incident. They were about to leave without discovering anything when a key testimony emerged. Dana's father told detectives that the killers had to be known to the family, as otherwise the dogs would have attacked them. This, combined with the lack of forced entry signs at any of the homes, narrowed the lines of investigation. Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine stated it was a cold-blooded crime and that the killers were still at large and armed. Efforts were made to locate the rest of the rodents' relatives to ensure their safety. 20 investigators combed through the state, searching every road and home, and interrogated every acquaintance of the family in an attempt to uncover what happened. This only caused a wave of panic in Pike County. Such was the uncertainty that a businessman named Jeff Ruby offered a reward of $25,000 for any tip that could help the police. Neighbors hung a sign on Christopher's barn door asking, "Do you know who killed us on April 22, 2016? In January 2017, the investigation yielded its first result, though it was only a side effect. A cousin of the rodents named Josh was arrested for substance trafficking. However, the police had already determined that the amount of marijuana grown by the rodents was not significant enough to suggest a cartel attack. Months passed, and the agents could not even find a motive after interviewing 550 people, gathering 1,100 tips, and examining 700 pieces of evidence. On April 13, 2017, the authorities had to break the hard news, announcing in the media that they did not have sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, the police assured that they had some leads, which they could not yet make public. Days later, on the first anniversary of the incident, a mass and a small tribute were organized, attended by various authorities. The Pike massacre remained a topic of discussion for everyone. But by the time 2 years had passed, only the neighbors continued to show interest in the case. Not even the local press, the sheriff, or the prosecutor attended the second memorial service. It seemed the county's largest criminal investigation would be forgotten. That changed in June when an important announcement was made. The prosecutor's words proved true as he publicly stated for the first time that they were focusing on the Wagners, the family of Hannah's ex-partner. The individuals named were George, his wife Angela, both 47, and their 2 sons, George, 27, and Edward, 26, known as Jake. All lived in Peebles, 25 kilometers from where the crime occurred. By then, the Wagners had moved to Kenai, a small town in Alaska, taking with them little Sophie, who ended up in her father's custody after Hannah's death. Their reason for leaving the state was claimed to be their deep affection for the Rodens and the immense pain their deaths caused them. The prosecutor requested any information about the Wagners from the public, but it wasn't long before they returned. Running out of money, they had to move back to Ohio. As preparations for their arrest were underway, agents uncovered how the relationship between the 2 families ended in bloodshed. Jake Wagner met Hannah Roden in high school when he was 18 and she was just 13. They went to prom together and became inseparable, which also brought the 2 families closer, sharing gatherings and celebrations. When Hannah was 15, she became pregnant with Jake's child. Shortly after Sophie's birth, Jake asked her to move in with him and his family, believing it would provide a healthier environment for the child. Hannah refused, feeling this was an attempt to control her. From then on, everything went downhill, with both wanting full custody of the girl and each family fighting for their own interests. On one occasion, Jake proposed that Hannah sign a document to share custody with him and his brother. Seeing Hannah's refusal, Jake began to threaten her, texting that he would take Sophie by force if necessary, and trying to manipulate her by saying that if she truly loved her daughter, she would know she needed to live with him. According to these messages, Jake believed the Rodens could harm the little girl. These conversations continued for 2 years, with Hannah refusing to live with the Wagners. In March 2015, she decided to end the relationship with Jake, citing his abusiveness. In one of her messages, she made it clear that he had hurt her and that she was tired of being pursued by him. These violent practices were common in the Wagner family, as George had managed to gain full custody of his son by threatening the child's mother with weapons. Things worsened when Hannah announced she was expecting a second daughter. Although she denied Jake was the father, he was not entirely convinced, given their resumed relationship. Far from respecting his ex-partner's wishes, he initiated a new dispute over paternity. In December 2015, Angela Wagner hacked into Hannah's social media accounts and discovered a message on Facebook that completely enraged the family. In it, Hannah told George's ex-wife that her ex-partner's family would have to kill her before she would give them custody of her daughter. A week before the incident, the Wagners made one last attempt to convince Hannah to give Jake full custody of Sophie. Hannah refused again, and then Jake's maternal grandmother falsified a document to make this happen. During the legal process, George's father and Christopher had a heated argument about where their granddaughter would live, completely severing the relationship between the two families. It was then that the Wagners began planning the crime. In Christmas 2016, they held a vote to decide whether to kill the Roden family to gain custody of Sophie. They all agreed. For 8 months, they meticulously planned the massacre, studying the Rodens' routines, their schedules, sleep patterns, and the layout of their homes, as well as investigating their security systems. They even went to the Rodens' property to fire guns into the air to check if the noise of the shots would carry too far. Noticing the sound would give them away, George's father decided it was best to purchase parts to make homemade silencers. Angela bought athletic shoes for her husband and sons to wear on the day of the crime and to destroy afterward. She also acquired phone jammers to secretly install on the victims' devices to prevent them from calling for help. George's father arranged for a van to be used that night without being recognized. On the night of the crime, Angela stayed home with Sophie, as it was their turn for shared custody, providing a perfect alibi. George's father went to Christopher's house to lure him into a supposed drug deal. Christopher agreed and opened his door, unaware of what would follow. Authorities found evidence that Angela had purchased the athletic shoes weeks before the murder, matching a blood-stained footprint found on the floor of one of the trailers. They also confirmed she had hacked her ex-daughter-in-law's account. Inspecting the Wagners' electronic devices, agents found internet searches on parental custody, indicating a clear obsession with controlling the children. However, there also appeared to be a conflict between the two families over $3,000 for the purchase of a car. Although Angela was evidently the mastermind behind the plan, the agents were certain that Jake led the executions and that all members of the Wagner clan participated. On November 13, 2018, authorities announced the arrest of 6 individuals, the first 4 being George's father, Angela, George's son, and Jake. They were indicted by the Pike County Grand Jury on 22 counts, including 8 charges of aggravated murder, and pleaded not guilty to all charges. Jake was also charged with a sexual offense for engaging in sexual conduct with Hannah when she was 15 and he was 20. On the same day, 2 additional individuals were arrested. Though they had not participated in the murders, they were accused of perjury and obstructing justice. These were Angela's mother, Rita, 65, and George's mother, Frederica, 76. The charges against Frederica included lying about purchasing bulletproof vests for her son. Neither was sent to prison, but Frederica was monitored electronically with a GPS device. Furthermore, authorities disclosed the motive behind the crime: the custody battle over Sophie. After years of uncertainty, the trial was all that remained. In June 2019, it was proven through receipts that Frederica had purchased the bulletproof vests after the incident, leading to the withdrawal of charges against her. Rita was not as fortunate. That same year, a handwriting analysis determined she was guilty of falsifying a document for Sophie's custody. In December, she began cooperating with the prosecution to avoid prison. The rest of the Wagners remained in jail, refusing to cooperate with the case and expressing sorrow over the Roden deaths, wishing for the real killers to be imprisoned. It seemed the case would never close, and Ohio residents could never rest easy until something unexpected happened 2 years later. On April 22, 2021, the 5th anniversary of the massacre, Jake reached a plea deal with prosecutors on the condition that his family members would not face the death penalty, but instead receive life sentences. He confessed to personally murdering 5 of the 8 victims and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including 8 for aggravated murder and others for conspiracy, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and unlawful sexual conduct with a minor. He testified that he felt compelled to kill Hannah to gain custody of his daughter and had to do the same to the rest of the Rodens, knowing they would seek revenge otherwise. He expressed deep remorse and was sentenced to 8 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Following the trial, he agreed to cooperate with the prosecution in the cases against his parents and brother. Thanks to his cooperation, authorities found the van George's father had purchased for the crime and 3 firearms the family had attempted to cut up and incinerate. These were buried in buckets of cement and hidden behind the Wagner residence's barn. A specialist managed to reconstruct the fragments to prove that the casings matched those found at the Rodens' trailers. On September 10th of that year, Angela Wagner pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, burglary, and tampering with evidence, agreeing to testify against the remaining accused individuals. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the aggravated murder charges against her, and she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Only those who continued to deny their involvement remained to be judged. The trial against George Wagner's son began on August 28, 2022. The prosecutor called the defendant's ex-partner to testify, who had distanced herself from the family fearing for her life. The prosecution argued that George was complicit in planning, executing, and covering up the murders. However, the young man denied having any knowledge of the crimes before, during, or after their commission, even stating that if his family had asked him to participate in such an act, he would have never agreed. After 3 months, he was found guilty of all 22 charges, including the 8 charges of aggravated murder, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, in addition to a consecutive sentence of 121 years for firearm possession. George's father was still awaiting his trial, which would not occur until February 2024. If found guilty of the same 22 charges as his son, he would face a similar fate. Despite the entire family being convicted, he continues to claim his innocence. The surviving children were placed in the care of distant relatives. Out of respect for their privacy, their whereabouts cannot be disclosed, but it is known that they are happy and safe. When asked about his father, Bentley says he is fixing cars in heaven with Jesus. The Wagners' goal was to gain custody of Sophie, claiming they would take better care of her, but in reality, they deprived her of her own mother, uncles, and grandparents. The hope is that she grows up far from her father's family, in an environment where violence is never a means to an end. Once again, dear audience, I thank you for your company. If you haven't subscribed yet, I warmly invite you to do so and become part of this great community. This is Unreal True Crime. Until the next episode. Good night.
Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The story of Alison Bonilla. On September 27, 2020, police and several neighbors from the Florencio del Castillo community were attempting to locate a young woman named Alison Bonilla, who had been missing for more than 5 months. They headed to an illegal dump located in San Jeronimo de Caxia in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. The first thing they spotted was a sock and a shoe, inside of which was a nail. Yendri, Alison's mother, instantly identified the clothing and even recognized the nail. Due to the nail polish color that had been applied at her nail salon, they're failing to find any more remains of the young woman. The search party withdrew, disheartened, but not defeated. The next day, they returned to the area and ventured down to a nearby coffee plantation, located 93 meters deep into the illegal dumping ground. What they found left them completely stunned. Buried beneath the soil, moss and weeds were skeletal remains of the young woman, including vertebrae, ribs, parts of her upper limbs, pelvic bones, and a femur connected by cartilage. 8 meters from that site, they discovered a piece of fabric belonging to the pants Alison was wearing the day she disappeared. A little further away, they found a second shoe and part of an arm. It appeared that the mysterious neighbor who had provided this information had not lied. The event had been as horrific as he had described. But how did all this happen? Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in the city of Cartago, Costa Rica. When she was very young, her parents divorced, and she went to live with her mother, Yendri Vasquez. They moved to the Florencio del Castillo community in the town of Ujeras. Despite her family's modest economic standing, Alison never lacked for anything. Growing up in a nurturing environment led her to become a highly sociable, friendly, and attentive young woman. Everyone who knew her adored her. She had an especially close relationship with her mother. They were like friends. Alison would even sometimes help her mother at her nail salon. At 18 years old, Alison led a quiet life. She attended night classes at a school which was several kilometers away from her home. In her town, it was common for young people to attend schools far from their communities, so walking through the streets was a routine part of her day. She spent most of her time with her boyfriend Harold Segura. Her days typically consisted of going from school to her boyfriend's house or meeting up with friends and family. However, this routine was shattered on March 4, 2020. At 5 p.m., Alison left her home wearing blue jeans, a white and mustard-colored blouse, and light-colored sneakers. She took a collective bus to go to the school and traveled the 5.5 kilometers to the institution with a friend. She arrived around 6 p.m. Only she said goodbye to her friend and decided to visit her aunt who lived nearby. She arrived at her aunt's house, but no one was home. She then went to her boyfriend's house, where she met his mother, and they chatted for a while. Eventually, Harold arrived, and they spent the rest of the afternoon together, until he had to leave for an errand. Seeing that it was getting dark, Allison thought it would be best to leave as soon as possible, and did not wait for her boyfriend to return to say goodbye. At 8 o'clock, Allison walked to the bus stop that would take her home to Florencio del Castillo. 10 minutes after boarding the bus, she received a text message from Harold, who was extremely worried. He told her it would have been better if she had waited for him to accompany her home. 40 minutes later, Allison got off at the bus stop closest to her home, but she still had a long distance to walk. The street was deserted, and the only light came from a few streetlights. Feeling somewhat anxious, Allison began the 1.6-kilometer walk to her home. She sent a message to her mother, Yendri, asking her to meet at a bridge 500 meters away from their house as they usually did. While walking, Allison noticed two men who appeared suspicious. They were heading in the same direction as her, so she quickened her pace and texted Harold, saying, "I was on the bus and just got off, and these two sketchy guys got off as well and are walking behind me. I'm going to speed up because I'm scared." Concerned, Harold advised her to take a taxi and promised to pay for it, but Allison declined. She texted him that she was close to the bridge where she was supposed to meet her mother. The men began to walk faster as if trying to catch up with her. When Yendri arrived at the meeting point, there was no sign of Allison. She repeatedly called her daughter's phone, but got no answer. Distraught, Yendri returned home, hoping that Allison might have taken an alternate route, and had already arrived. Upon reaching home, she found it empty. The last time Allison had been online was at 8:40 p.m. Yendri tried to contact her again, but the messages went unanswered. The next day, she officially reported her daughter's disappearance to the police. The authorities began searching for clues to Allison's whereabouts. The first lead was security footage from a camera near the bridge where Allison was supposed to meet her mother. The tape showed her walking down the street toward her home, 8:47 p.m., at some point quickening her pace before disappearing into the darkness. There were no further traces of her after that. The following day, the Judicial Investigation Organization and the Ministry of Public Security joined the search. They examined various places close to the locality, including a lake and a nearby hydroelectric dam. The case drew the attention of the community, who decided to assist the authorities in the search. While investigating the streets near Allison's home, they discovered an object that caught their attention: a pair of plasters lying on the ground. This development was strange because the police had already searched the same area on the first day and found no trace of Allison. Someone seemed to be attempting to mislead them. On March 11th, a local resident came to the police station to share something suspicious he had seen on the day of Allison's disappearance. Around 8:30 p.m., the neighbor observed Allison walking briskly down the street near the bridge. A wine-colored BMW was parked nearby and started to follow her, gradually increasing its speed before stopping in front of her. Allison spoke for a few seconds with the person inside the car and then got in. The car then sped away at high speed. Upon hearing the neighbor's account, the police took immediate action to locate the vehicle. They searched all the houses near Allison's residence. On March 25th, they found the car in one of these homes. On March 29th, the Judicial Investigation Organization announced that they had seized the car for DNA testing. They also revealed that an investigation was underway against the car's owner, a man named Nelson Sanchez Urena. The 28-year-old man was known in the neighborhood for being extremely reclusive. He hardly spoke to anyone, and when he did, he was not friendly. Locals said he came from a somewhat strange family about which not much was known. One even speculated that he was involved with regional gangs. while the police continued to gather evidence to warrant the arrest of Sanchez Urena. Now, the prime suspect in Allison's disappearance. Another significant event occurred. On April 4th, an employee of a store near the area found Allison's identification card. This was the second item belonging to Allison that had mysteriously appeared. The search continued, with authorities believing they were getting closer to discovering Allison's whereabouts. On April 17th, the police confirmed that they had found significant clues related to Allison's disappearance in the seized car, although they did not disclose any further details. On May 1st, the Costa Rican Red Cross joined the search efforts for Allison. Despite more people joining the search team, her body still remained missing. In the following months, the police focused on investigating the prime suspect and gathering enough evidence to charge him. Finally, on September 2nd, the Judicial Investigation Organization ordered the arrest of Sanchez Urena. He was formally arrested that same day without resistance. 24 hours later, authorities revealed that they had found traces of blood in the trunk, the car that had been seized over 5 months ago. These traces were matched with DNA samples from Allison Bomia's family. The results confirmed that there was no doubt that Sanchez Urena had attacked the young woman inside his car. Realizing that there was no turning back, Sanchez Urena decided it was time to confess his crime. He requested a meeting with his lawyer to reconstruct the events for the police. On March 4, 2020, Sanchez Urena was driving his car when he saw Allison walking quickly down the street. He offered her a ride home, claiming it was late and that 2 nearby strangers looked suspicious. Trusting him, Allison got into the car, but once inside, Sanchez Urena attacked her and forced her into the trunk of the vehicle. He then took her to a coffee plantation. Once there, he forced her out of the car and took her about 140 meters from the entrance of the property, where no one could hear them. After reaching the secluded spot, he struck her, causing an injury that left her unconscious. Blood splattered on the ground as he proceeded to assault her. After completing the horrific act, he walked back to where he had left his car, put Allison's body in the front seat, and tied her hands with a piece of cloth and adhesive tape. He then placed her back in the trunk of the car. Next, Sanchez Urena drove to an illegal dumping ground and took Allison, who was still unconscious, out of the trunk. Without hesitation, he threw the body into a coffee plantation approximately 450 meters deep to ensure that she would remain there undetected. The police subsequently ordered 6 months of preventive detention for the main suspect. That same day, they went to the illegal dumping ground to search for Allison's body. Dozens of volunteers who had been following the case on TV and were devastated by the news of her loss joined the search. On September 27, a sock and a shoe were found, which Allison's mother, Yendri, identified as belonging to her daughter. Inside the shoe was a nail that the mother instantly recognized, as she had painted it in her salon just days before her daughter's disappearance. The following day, a team of rescuers descended into a coffee plantation near the illegal dumping ground. Using safety ropes and specialized mountaineering equipment, they reached a depth of 93 meters where they found vertebrae, ribs, parts of the upper limbs, pelvis, and a femur connected by cartilage. These remains were covered in undergrowth, soil, and moss, some even fused to the ground. 8 meters from the previous site, a piece of fabric was found, belonging to the pants Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared. A second shoe and small bone fragments, which appeared to be part of an arm, were also discovered. They were unable to locate the young woman's skull. It may have rolled out of sight due to its shape. The remains were taken to a laboratory to verify if they match Allison's DNA. Forensic experts found that the body had fractures in the thoracic spine and ribs, which were consistent with the injuries caused by the fall, as described by the suspect. This indicated that they were dealing with a premeditated murder. Although Yendri, Allison's mother, was utterly devastated by the loss of her daughter. She found some solace in knowing that Sanchez Urena would spend the rest of his life in jail. During a press conference, Yendri's lawyers stated that they would do everything possible to ensure the murderer faced the full extent of the law, serving as many years in prison as possible. While they couldn't bring Allison back to life, they could seek justice on her behalf. As they awaited the start of the legal process, Allison's family held a funeral. On March 1, 2021, Sanchez was officially charged with homicide. On April 30, the criminal court ordered his trial and extended his pretrial detention by another 4 months to prevent any escape attempts. While the case had made significant progress, the most challenging part remained: gathering enough evidence to prove the act was premeditated. Yendri testified that Sanchez Urena had previous encounters with Allison. On one occasion, Allison had gone to pick up her cousins from the bus stop and met the suspect. The man offered them a ride home, which they accepted despite the awkward silence during the trip. Days later, Allison received a message on Facebook from Sanchez Urena, asking if she disliked him. Allison replied that she didn't, as they had never spoken, and she didn't know him well enough to form an opinion. The man tersely acknowledged her response. This demonstrated a long-term obsession with Allison, as he even claimed to be deeply in love with her and envious of those she spent time with. However, during the trial, the defendant completely changed his version of events. He claimed innocence and said his previous statements were made under police pressure and torture. Nevertheless, there was no turning back. The body was found where he initially indicated, and DNA evidence in the car directly implicated him. Allison's family provided their testimony in a separate room, as they did not want to face the attacker. Despite this, Sanchez Urena continued to plead innocent. On the morning of August 18, 2021, he was officially sentenced to 18 years in prison for simple homicide. He was acquitted of the abuse charge due to the state in which Allison's body was found, making it impossible to prove. The family was dissatisfied with the sentence, calling for up to 35 years in prison, which is customary in such cases. The verdict was later annulled by the Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice, and the case was reopened to determine if the crime involved premeditation. In November 2021, the appeals court rejected the family's claims and upheld the original sentence. As of today, the case remains open, and Allison's family is pushing for the crime to be reclassified as aggravated homicide and for a review of the sentence. Yendri, Allison's mother, has not only had to cope with the horrific loss of her daughter, but also with cyberbullying. Dozens of people found her Facebook profile and posted messages on her wall, blaming her for Allison's death because she had allowed her daughter to walk alone at night. Local residents came forward in various meetings to say that it's entirely normal for young people in the region to walk long distances from bus stops to their homes. Allison's boyfriend has given several interviews, expressing his outrage over what happened. He mentioned that Allison had many dreams and goals, which Sanchez Urena took away from her. Despite this, he felt grateful for the 1 year and 10 months he had spent with her, stating that she will always be his angel and the best life partner he could have ever had. Although the investigation has technically closed, several questions remain. The family's lawyer has pointed out that it is quite strange for Sanchez Urena to have moved Allison's body to the bottom of a landfill without any help. There is also the mystery of who the men were who had been pursuing Allison on the day of her disappearance, which prompted her to get into the car of her former neighbor. After an audio message that Allison sent her boyfriend went viral, the public has one burning question. Did these two men have anything to do with Sanchez Urena's sinister plan? And if not, why were they following the young woman late at night? The trial concluded too quickly, leaving the family dissatisfied with the sentence. They hope that, in the future, such cases will receive the necessary attention so that all those involved face the appropriate penalties. Once again, dear audience, I thank you for your time and for being part of this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, I cordially invite you to do so. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. Good night. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The horrible case of Laura Cielo Lopez. Laura Cielo Lopez was born on November 11, 2000, in the city of Plotier, Argentina. Her older sisters, Melissa and Damaris, adored her from the very first moment. When Laura was just 3 years old, her mother passed away in a car accident, leaving the 3 sisters in the care of their father. Initially, he worked hard to keep the family afloat, but a few years later, he fell into alcoholism. Despite the terrible things happening around her, Laura was a very sweet and affectionate child, which is why her sisters started calling her Cielo, or Heaven, in English, a nickname that everyone who knew her would eventually adopt. As the years went by, the girl's father lost his job, and all of them had to look for work. At 18, Laura spent her days selling fried cakes, then attended high school in the evening shift, and in her free time, she took care of her nephews. She was very close to graduating and dreamed of finding a good job to restore financial stability to her family. Unfortunately, an event occurred that prevented this from happening. On September 12, 2019, Cielo spent the entire afternoon with Damaris, serving her mata while she cleaned the house. Her sister joked that it was the first time she had made the infusion correctly. It was a cheerful day. Later, Cielo went to school, where her classmates noticed she was acting strange. She didn't sit in her usual spot, but at the back of the classroom, and left 20 minutes before class ended. Around 11:30 p.m., she arrived home, where she met up with some friends. They spent a good time chatting, drinking beer, and taking selfies to post on Instagram. At 3 in the morning, they said goodbye to Cielo because she was very tired and said she was going to sleep. The next day, Melissa wrote to her asking if she had gone to a medical appointment for an ear problem, but she got no response. She then called Damaris to find out if she was with her. The concern grew as Cielo was also not at her house. Hours passed, and the young woman still hadn't appeared, so they decided to report her missing to the police. Once at the police station, the officers told them they had to wait 48 hours from the last time they saw Cielo to request a search. They claimed she was probably with some boy, as this was supposedly common among teenagers. However, by Saturday, Cielo had not shown any signs of life, and the police finally took the report and began searching for her, but it was already too late. On Sunday the 15th, 2 fishermen, aged between 20 and 30, were carrying out their work in the area of the breakwaters of the Limay River. This location was only 15 kilometers from Cielo's house. They were calm until they saw something that took their breath away: the body of a young woman, cut into 8 parts, floating in the water. They quickly notified the authorities. On arrival, the first thing the authorities noticed was the brutality of the body's condition. It had clearly been cut by someone skilled with knives. The detectives continued to search the area to see if they could find clues about the victim's identity. Nearby in the same river, they found some tights and underwear. Not far away, they found 2 rings and, eventually, a knife full of blood at the bottom of the river. They decided to call Cielo's family. When Damaris arrived at the scene and saw the objects, she did not doubt for a second that they belonged to her sister. The autopsy was conducted by Dr. Carlos, who noted that the cause of death had been a severe skull trauma, causing internal cerebral hemorrhage. The trauma was caused by a blow to the occipital part of the head, resulting in loss of consciousness. Cielo had been agonizing for 2 to 4 hours. Had she received medical attention, she might have survived. She also had bruises on her arms, indicating she had been struck and had struggled to save herself from her attacker. Moreover, the forensic examination confirmed what Cielo's sisters feared. The body had intimate injuries compatible with abuse. Finally, it indicated that due to the characteristics of the cuts on the neck, arms, and legs, it could be affirmed that the perpetrator used knives with a flat and scalloped edge, meaning they had no medical or anatomical knowledge, which broadened the list of suspects. The detectives had no idea who could have committed such a heinous crime. By analyzing the location of Cielo's cell phone, they detected that a man had contacted her after 3 in the morning on Friday. His name was Alfredo Escobar. He was 28 years old and worked as a mechanic. In the past, he had attended the same high school as Cielo. He was fond of fishing, which likely meant he knew how to handle a knife. The distance between his home and the crime scene was 2.5 kilometers, or about 20 blocks, which helped with the cell phone tower signals. At 3 o'clock, 3:22, 3:36, and 3:40 a.m. on September 13th, the young woman received 4 calls from this man. By then, the cell towers placed each of them in their respective homes. Then both cell phones were activated at her house. Starting at 4:29 a.m., the young woman's phone moved towards the downtown area and ended up at Escobar's residence. At 5 a.m., Cielo uploaded a WhatsApp story with an alien emoji. Her cell phone was still at the man's house. By 5:52 a.m., the young woman's mobile phone stopped emitting a signal, and after that, no one heard from her again. These records also showed that Escobar turned off his cell phone until 11:05 p.m. the next day. At that time, the phone was picked up by a cell tower in the place where Cielo's remains were later found. At 12:05 a.m. on Sunday, September 15th, he returned to his home. The investigation also included analysis of videos from 13 security cameras, including urban monitoring, private homes, and businesses, specifically reviewing footage from the early hours of September 13th. In 2 of these video records, 2 people could be seen walking back to back, resembling Cielo and Escobar, matching the young woman's cell phone movement. There was no doubt Escobar was the only suspect in the case. During the investigation, one of the officers recognized him, recalling an encounter a year prior. Escobar had crashed into a police patrol while driving at over 80 kilometers per hour, resisted arrest, and had an active case against him. He was close to going to trial for this incident, but now he faced a completely different and much more serious charge. On September 17th, a police watch was set up about 30 meters from Escobar's house. At 8:30 a.m., they saw a car arrive, and a young person who appeared to be the suspect got out. He entered the house and then came out accompanied by 2 adults around 60 years old. All 3 got into the vehicle. Without raising suspicion, the officers followed the vehicle for a while, noting that it stopped near a highway bridge. At that moment, Escobar and the older man got out of the car, and the police approached them to request their documentation. Escobar was in the company of his father, and the other person inside the vehicle was none other than his mother. It was clear they were attempting to flee the city. The young man did not resist the procedure but appeared extremely nervous. He asked if he could smoke and wanted to move away from the police car. When told this was not possible, he put out the cigarette, sat in his car, and lit one. After a while, he was taken to the police station, and the vehicle was confiscated. A few hours later, he underwent medical examinations, which revealed inflammation in the knuckles of his right hand, consistent with having thrown a punch. He also had cuts on one finger and a bruise on the palm of his right hand. These injuries dated back a few days, likely to the date of Cielo's death, probably incurred while attacking the young woman. Following these examinations, Escobar was formally charged with abuse, carnal access, and femicide, utilizing his right to remain silent. He was placed in pretrial detention for 6 months, as there was considered to be a risk of flight or obstruction of the investigation. On September 17th, the first search of the Escobar family's house was conducted. The property was large, with 60 meters in depth and 12 meters in front. In the back, there was a construction project of 2 apartments. Entering the room where Escobar slept, they discovered that the walls had marks. They tested them with luminol and found what they suspected: blood. Then they went to the backyard, where things only got worse. Among the vegetation, they found blood remains. It was clear that Cielo had received there the blow that caused her death. The investigators took the blood to compare it with Cielo's and Escobar's, and also ordered a DNA test on the fluid found on Cielo's body to see if it matched the suspects. Escobar's lawyer argued that until those results were available, they should not accuse him of abuse. Fortunately, the results arrived quickly. The Central Laboratory of the Ministry of Public Health compared the samples collected during the search with the genetic profile of the victim and the accused. All showed a match. They also analyzed the sneakers that Escobar was wearing at the time of his arrest and the knife found at the bottom of the river. Both items had Cielo's DNA on them. Then, 3 swabs were taken from the intimate areas, and one of them showed compatibility with Escobar's DNA. The investigators were now in a position to affirm that the subject had abused Cielo, then murdered her, dismembered her, and disposed of her body. On September 21, the justice system confirmed these findings during a press conference. The case prosecutor stated that he suspected the individual had murdered Cielo to hide the abuse. If found guilty of this charge, he would receive a life sentence. However, more evidence was still needed. Escobar declared himself innocent, but again, technology would expose him. His cell phone was confiscated, and by court order, he had to provide the access code for forensic analysis. It was found that although he had Cielo among his contacts, he had deleted her after the night of her disappearance. After committing the act, between 6 and 10 in the morning, he deleted the call logged to the victim, but he did not delete their Facebook Messenger chat. The investigation also revealed that on September 11, 12, and 13, the subject had accessed the social network to view the photographs Cielo uploaded. Despite the evidence, the sinister man continued to claim his innocence, but everything was against him. A hypothesis was finally formulated about what happened on the night of the crime. On Thursday, September 12, 2019, Cielo left high school around 8 at night, returned home, and spent some time with friends until 3 in the morning, when she told them she was tired and would go to sleep. 40 minutes after she was left alone, she received a message from Escobar, and they began to chat. Although they knew each other from living in the same city and attending the same school, they were not friends. However, they had mutual acquaintances, which gave her confidence. After a while of chatting, the subject asked if she could come over. She calmly accepted, and at 4, he picked her up and went to his house. What happened in the house was a mystery, but considering the forensic analysis, it was believed that Cielo opposed having relations with the man. Completely enraged, he proceeded to abuse her. After committing the terrible act, he began to fear that she would report him. That's when he decided to take her life. He took her to the back of the house and hit her twice in the head. However, he did not achieve his goal. Cielo was still alive, agonizing. In a totally cruel act, Escobar hid her body for a couple of hours while thinking about what to do. He turned off his phone so that no one would bother him. Cielo's body was in the under-construction part of the house for almost 24 hours. During that time, the contusion she had received took her life. Finally, the subject dismembered the body with a sharp knife from his kitchen, hid the body in his car, and drove 15 kilometers to the area at the Limahe River. He disposed of the body parts, throwing them away as if they were worthless. Once there, he turned his phone back on, relieved and believing he had finished the job. The story of the case became public, and all of city strongly condemned the accused. But the most striking declaration came from Escobar's 23-year-old younger sister, who posted a message on her social networks addressing both her brother and the victim. The publication received mixed reactions. Some people empathized with her, while others accused her of being complicit. Following these attacks, the girl asked that the focus not be lost on what was important: Cielo and her family. She demanded that the fight continue so that there would be no more victims of femicide. Melissa, on her part, contacted Escobar's sister and thanked her for the post. She also requested that people stop attacking her, as she was not to blame. Then the trial against the accused began. In the first hearing, the prosecutor accused Escobar of being the only responsible for the act. The charge was for aggravated homicide against a woman, involving gender violence and abuse with carnal access. In that same hearing, the experts who had intervened in the analysis of the clothing found in the river alongside the remains, and in the evidence found at the bottom of the subject's home, testified. But the most striking confession came from Cielo's best friend. During the trial, she recounted that for months, Escobar had been sending messages to Cielo, inviting her to have a good time and drink beer, but they had never had a date. For her part, she had known him for about 5 years and was aware of his bad reputation. For a long time, Escobar's house had been a party place. Every weekend, the house was filled with alcohol and substances, and there were even couples who had intimacy in front of the rest of those present. She had attended those gatherings but decided to distance herself from that environment when she started a relationship and became pregnant. She emphasized that Cielo had never gone with her. She repeatedly advised Cielo not to meet with Escobar. Cielo always said she wouldn't and that she ignored his messages. However, the defense asked why she didn't recommend Cielo to block the contact. Firmly, she replied that it was her friend's decision, and she didn't want to tell her what to do with her life. While she remained on the stand, she was shown the security camera footage from the day Cielo disappeared. They specifically showed her the footage from 4 in the morning, where 2 people were seen walking backwards through downtown. She had no doubt in recognizing that it was Cielo. She said that her sneakers, her coat, and her way of walking were unmistakable, and she also identified Escobar. As if this witness was not enough, another woman expressed her need to testify against the accused. The prosecution and the victim's family requested that her name remain anonymous and that the accused not be present. The judge granted the request, but allowed the accused to stay on one side of the room, out of the witness's sight. The woman narrated that, sometime before the incident, Escobar had gone out with her. They met through Facebook, the same social network through which he contacted Cielo. They bought 2 beers and took a walk around the neighborhood, then bought 2 more beers. It was then that Escobar invited her to his house, with clear intentions of intimacy. She told him she didn't want to, and the man appeared frustrated, but did not force her. She told him she wanted to change, to be someone new. They were together until about 2 in the morning. Once Escobar returned home, he messaged her again, asking her to have sex. He insisted for a while, but she stopped responding. It was probably at that moment that he contacted Cielo. When the girl found out he was the main suspect in the incident, she was in shock. She hesitated a lot before going to the police station, thinking that if she talked to him, she might convince him to turn himself in voluntarily, but that didn't happen. After hearing the statement, the defense asked if Escobar had been violent towards her in an attempt to discredit her story. She replied that he had not. However, Escobar's impulsive behavior was evident when a friend testified against him, saying he was a womanizer with a substance addiction. His ex-partner also took the stand, stating they had not ended on good terms. Years earlier, she had reported him because she suspected that he had broken into her house and stolen her money. When she confronted him to return her things, Escobar hit the friend who was with her. In response to these statements, the accused tried to defend himself, pointing to a friend who was also his drug dealer as the perpetrator of the crime. He narrated that on the night in question, he was under the influence of substances, and this man was with Cielo at his house. At one point, Escobar heard a scream from one of his rooms and ran to see what had happened. Once he saw the blood, he focused on cleaning it up, then helped his friend hide Cielo's body, referring to it as that thing. At the end of his story, he thanked for having the space to share his version of the truth. However, no evidence was found, and this statement did not prosper. Escobar remained the only suspect. In his closing argument, the prosecutor argued that the man had taken advantage of his prior knowledge of the victim and betrayed her trust. He planned the brutality of his actions and the despicable manner in which he had dismembered and hidden the body. He asserted that the accused had a contemptuous relationship with women, evidenced when he referred to Cielo's body as that thing. The jury's deliberation took only 40 minutes. In a unanimous verdict, Escobar was found guilty of abuse with carnal access and homicide. The latter had the aggravating factor of having been carried out to hide the abuse and for involving gender violence. For this reason, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Although the case did not go unpunished and tranquility was restored to the community, the problem has not been solved. The rate of cases in Argentina continues to rise every minute. The case of Cielo highlights the need for a program to educate children, young people, and adults on gender issues. The young woman's family launched an initiative to make this possible. In September 2020, almost a year after the murder, the Cielo Lopez Law was approved. This law mandates training on the subject for students and teachers at all levels of the provincial educational system to prevent violence against women. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.